Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of DailyDead.com. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jonathan James, and today I am joined by Bryan Christopher, Derek Anderson, and Tamika Jones. In this episode, we're going to be spending a lot of it discussing James Wan's Malignant. It just came out to theaters. It just came out to HBO Max. A lot of people are talking about it. We're going to be talking about it. And so that'll be the main focus of our episode. But before we get to that, it's been a little bit. So I missed my co-host. I missed you, Corpse Club listeners, and excited to be back here. We had, our class of 81, and we had special episodes in support of that. We had the excellent Phantasm retrospective series, which is still going on, but I encourage you to check those out if you haven't.
Boo.
But I'm excited to be co-hosting this episode. Like I said, I'm excited to be here with my co-hosts and to catch back up. As I've mentioned before, in some cases, because things are so busy, things are still, so weird where, a lot of us are not traveling and, a lot of us are staying inside, whether it's, co-hosts or our listeners. And so for me, this still is one of the good ways to catch up with all my friends. So I think, we're going to start with just, like I said, just kind of loosen up here. And I just want to hear, how are you all doing? So, Tamika, why don't you tell our listeners and tell me, what have you been up to? How are things going? And it can be, what you've been watching. It can be what games you've been playing, or it can be trips you've taken or whatever. What have you been up to, Tamika?
I've been pretty good. I'm very happy to be back on the podcast, if I'm honest. I'm happiest doing that. Anything with friends, and especially, we're doing something horror related. But I'm good. I actually, I got finally, it's September. So not finally, because I love the summer. And I'm not going to lie, I'm really going to miss the nice warm weather. It's okay though. But because it's September, now I can work on my Halloween costume. So that's what I've been doing this week. I got all of the things most of the things I already had. So I didn't want to really go out and about, So most things I already had, but I did have to order one thing. So I'm really excited.
Is your Halloween costume a secret, or can we know what it is?
Well,
no pressure. If it's a secret, we'll save it for our Halloween hangover episode.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you a hint though.
Okay.
Because we're all I feel like we're all familiar with Blink-182.
Yes.
So that's your hint.
Okay.
Are you going as Mark Hoppus for Halloween?
No. No. When you see the costume, I swear it'll make sense. It will. It'll make sense. Think about it, Bryan.
Yes.
I feel like you're there. You're circling the wagons.
I'll figure it out. I'm going to crack the code. I'm probably not. I'm not that smart.
Oh, okay. And I bought a car.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Congratulations.
Awesome.
I know. It's been 14 years. So.
Is it a spooky car?
Yeah. It's black. It's
that works.
It's a Jeep Renegade. It's black.
Ooh, nice.
I named it Ruby.
That's the way to do it. You got to name the car.
That's my rule. You have to name the car. That way it won't break down on you.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that rule. I could have saved myself from a lot of pain.
Avoided some breakdowns.
Exactly.
Or it might try to kill you.
It's loved. It knows it's loved, so then it won't break down on you.
Especially if you name it Christine.
Okay.
Then it really won't break down on you, and then some.
Oh gosh. But then it might do other really bad things.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe not the greatest example, but
it's Now I got a demon car.
That's true. I'd like
I
a
bought a
demon
new
car.
car and a demon car.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, how about you, Derek? What have you been up to lately?
The summer just kind of went by in a blur. I did a lot. It's like August and now September's halfway over at the time of this recording. Really just feels like it's been a blur, but a lot of good things happening. I got to do some fishing, and my dad fishes these bass fishing tournaments in the Classic Bass or Champions Tour circuit here in Minnesota. So I got to help out with that and just been outdoors a lot, just trying to soak up as much sun as possible before the long winter arrives, as it always does. But it's actually been a really hot summer for this area. So it's been kind of nice to soak up some extra vitamin D, and yeah, just doing some outdoor projects. We've been just doing some work outside in the yard and things like that. And then of course, keeping up on movies every Tuesday. Me and my friend Zach, the Tuesday movie man, Zach, that we used to do the blog with, him and I still see a movie every Tuesday, whether it's like over streaming, and especially with the pandemic, we did a lot of Zoom movies. So been watching a lot of non-horror movies, and recently saw Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So I had a really good time with that. It's one of my favorite Marvel movies, like recent Marvel movies, and some really good horror stuff in there too. So that was a lot of fun.
Nice. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. I gotta wait. Disney didn't release it to Disney Plus, so as soon as they do, I'll
I know,
check it
right?
out. Yeah.
Yeah. Derek, when you've brought up the bass tournament before, that always just makes me think of have any of you guys ever seen Bloodhook?
Oh no, but I really want to, because I
feel like you'll particularly appreciate that as someone who's involved with bass tournaments. Because it literally takes place during this town's big bass tournament event. And for those who aren't familiar, it's a slasher movie whose the gimmick is that like the killer uses various fishing equipment to kill his victims. So,
okay.
Yeah, Derek, I think I would be interested to get your take on that, to see how how real were they with the bass tournament.
Yeah, this movie got on my radar because Alan Dorich wrote like a 35-year retrospective on Daily Dead over the summer.
I thought you were going to say a 35-page essay on it.
Well, that's what I'm going to write after watching it, so I'm sure. But yeah, I think they filmed it in Hayward, Wisconsin, which I know where that is. It's not far from where I live. So I love that they actually made a movie like that. And I know I really need to watch that now. just because, and I mean, come on, you're dealing with hooks and things like that. It just lends itself to horrible things happening. So I really need to see this.
That's actually one of my biggest fears when I go fishing, is that I'll hook myself, because for those who don't fish, the hooks you use to make sure that they stay set have barbs on them. So if you get that hooked into yourself, that's basically your day over, because you're going to need to have someone go figure that out in terms of getting it taken out. My dad, it's become like an annual event for him now to hook himself in some appendage while he's fishing. I am super, super careful when I'm taking the fish off a hook, because as much as I love the movie Hellraiser, I do not want to recreate it.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never hooked
that
myself.
would not be fun.
Derek, have you, all the years fishing, how many times have you hooked yourself? I'm sure it's happened.
It's definitely happened. Thankfully, not to the point where I had to go to the hospital, or there's a trick that you can do with fishing line to try and pull the hook out if it really gets in there. So I've never had to have that happen, although I know people that have. And thankfully, whenever I've certainly like hundreds of times broken the skin with a hook, but thankfully never like in the, where I'm getting pulled into the water or anything like that. So some blood has been drawn, but nothing too serious.
I hope we didn't curse you by talking about it.
Yeah, nothing.
Next week
like
we're gonna get like a picture of like, hey guys, guess what?
Yeah, it happened.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how about
nothing
you?
Like the perfect storm.
Yeah. Well, how about you, Brian? What have you been up to? I know some of what you've been up to because we were hanging out last week. Virtually.
So, we've talked about this a couple times on the show, but I have been running some Alien Tabletop RPG games sessions with Jonathan and a group of people. We started off with a one shot, and now we've been doing a little bit more of an extended campaign. It's funny because these games say like, the one shot, like if you're really sticking to it, is more like 2 or 3 sessions, unless you want to do it all day. And this latest one we're doing, it's called Destroyer of Worlds. It's supposed to be like maybe 3 sessions, and we're not even through. Like it's a 3-act structure. We're not even through the first act yet, and they've been through 2 3-hour sessions of it already. Because it's a game that lends itself to, if you are Alien fans, you can really just kind of role play and immerse yourself in the world pretty well with this game, which is good because like there's a lot of meat to chew on. But the flip side is if you're ever like, oh, get a quick session of Alien Tabletop, like that ain't gonna happen. Like you need to kind of cut some time aside because it's going to take you a little bit. But we've really been enjoying it. Like I do think it's a game that lends itself to being like, I think you're probably going to enjoy it more if you're already an Alien fan. But I guess the flip side of that would be, as a fan, there's probably certain things where like you're going to see some of the different beats coming. Whereas if you're not familiar with the Alien universe, it might be a little bit more surprising. But I think, and Jonathan, let me know kind of what your thoughts are. I think they give enough twists and turns that they throw you for some loops, so it's not just like a paint by numbers kind of a situation.
Yeah, and I think what's really nice about it is they create a story knowing all of the Alien and Prometheus movies that have taken place. Mm-hmm. So it may have it may feel, because it's all Marines, it has a feeling of Aliens, but we also can kind of tell that it's informed by some of the things that have happened in Prometheus. And even that was more so in that one-off we did, where we went up fighting neomorphs. So yeah, it's cool. I really enjoyed it so far. And you do a great job. You see, Brian spends so much time setting it up and leading it all, and it's amazing. We have so much fun doing it.
Much appreciated. Cool. Yeah, and it's just fun to see like the anxiety-inducing part of running RPGs like this, but also the best part of running RPGs like this is like you have the guardrails that you're trying to set up, but you never know where the players are going to want to take it. So like the best moments are times where you wind up getting thrown for a loop and have to think on your feet because the players have decided to do something like way off the wall, or they've and this happens a lot, mainly because sometimes like you're always looking for clues as to which direction to go in an RPG. And sometimes the person running the game gives something that seems like it's more important than it really is, either on purpose or by accident.
Is that the park?
Yes. Yeah. So there was kind of this, everybody in the group at one point was like, had their sights fixated on this park because of something offhanded that I said, which turns out like in my head had absolutely nothing to do with where the main plot was going. So it was just kind of one of those things where a combination of rolling with it, but also knowing when you got to tell the group like, hey, maybe the narrator is just a dumbass and put too much emphasis on something that isn't really that important.
For 1 month, my mental checklist was, we're going to finish this part of the mission, then we're going to the park.
They bring up the park. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Park?
Or like park, of course.
The park, of course, the park. Definitely. Yeah, definitely important. But yeah, so that kind of thing is a lot of fun. Been having a good time with that, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how. Like I said, it's a 3-act structure. We're not even through the first act yet, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how the rest of this plays out.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
And then literally today, the day we're recording this marks, I do have my Halloween costume picked out. I don't have it assembled yet. I also don't want to give it away yet, but I will say that I will need to practice doing a quasi kind of crappy Transylvanian accent.
Okay.
A feeling I know where that could be going.
I think so too. Yeah.
And then last but not least, in terms of stuff I've seen, not a new movie, but new to me, Witchfinder General. Vincent Price being a right bastard as a witchfinder in the, I think, like 17th, 18th century, who, of course, completely abuses his office. Just very interesting to see Price do there's a certain level of kind of camp and over the top mustache twirling, but it's not he's not doing it with a wink and a smile. Like, this is a bad guy and he's really playing it pretty straight for the most part. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. It was a bit of a harrowing experience, as you would expect from, someone who is abusing his office at the expense of, people's lives. And, but yeah, I really appreciate it. And it's actually got me kind of, I've seen a few Vincent Price movies, but I kind of want to dig deeper into his catalog now.
Yeah, it's definitely one of his best performances. It's the movie's it's not a fun movie, but it's definitely, like, you like Vincent Price, you haven't seen Witchfinder General, check it out. Or if you're in the UK, it's The Conqueror Worm.
Wow, vastly different title.
It would actually make a pretty interesting double feature with The Devils.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Why am I blanking on the star's name?
Oh, Ken Russell?
Ken Russell movie. Who's it? Oliver
Reed.
Oliver Reed. Yeah. I think they're different takes on a similar kind of central premise.
Oh, and for more reading on Witchfinder General, be sure to check out Jonathan's excellent Halloween piece from 2018 on Daily Dead.
Yeah.
I wrote a piece on Witchfinder General.
You sure did.
Gotta love when Derek makes a pull that, like, even the author doesn't remember.
You know what? I feel like Scott, though. It wasn't even that long ago.
And apparently there's, for a few years now, there's been rumors of a remake that is supposed to happen, but there really hasn't been anything on that lately, I don't think. So I don't know if that's actually going to move forward or not, but just something to keep in mind.
Of Witchfinder General?
Yes.
Or of the Devil? Oh, interesting.
Now I'm going to have to read my piece again.
Maybe I shouldn't have referred people to it.
No. It's okay. I hopefully I stand behind it. But yeah, it's interesting how that works, though. Sometimes is that there's some things that I remember clearly. I can remember things from when I was 5. I don't remember writing that article. I have no idea. And so it's interesting how the brain works, because, we always think that we have, in a lot of cases, you think you have such a good memory, and I remember this like clear as day, but clearly there's gaps, and that was one of them. So I'm going to check it out.
Better, I had to think for several minutes to remember what I wrote about for that. So it was Haxon, I believe, if I remember correctly.
You are correct, I believe.
Oh man, are you cheating?
Oh, well, I mean,
now I have
fine.
to.
Yeah, that's fine.
I knew it.
Yes, you did write about Haxon.
Right. See, he didn't even. He only cheated to verify.
And since we're on the subject, Tamika, you wrote about practical magic.
I knew, yeah. I remember. I love that movie.
Which I just saw for the first time in the last year. And
yay!
Quite liked it. Very melodramatic.
See? Yeah.
I also watched that for the first time I guess it was a few years ago now, But yeah, that was a fun one.
It is so much fun. You know, it's a good cast too. It's just such a good this is such a good cozy. Despite some things that happen in it, I find it to be very cozy and kind of I don't know. I think it's the aesthetic, really.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have a similar memory of it because it was. I watched it. I actually remember it was for Halloween last year, and we had just. My wife and I had just made the big move from Delaware to Seattle. And we were staying in a hotel Halloween night because we were just getting ready to actually move into our actual apartment. And so we just decided we can't go out and do anything, obviously, because this is middle of the pandemic. So we just lined up a bunch of, kind of spooky / Halloween flavored movies. Practical Magic was one of them. And yeah, it was really nice just to kind of hang out and see that.
Yeah. Yes, doing practical magic work, doing the work for practical magic.
That sounds like a movie, in a hotel one night on Halloween night, watching horror movies.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, we can't say too much because someone will take our cool movie idea.
Right. We're gonna save that for later.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I'll share a little bit of what I was up to. I mean, we know I was playing the Alien RPG with Bryan and others, and I also been playing Aliens Fireteam Elite that came out.
Ooh,
I don't know, within the last couple of weeks. It's good, but I'm going to start with the sad part of this, and the sad part of this is I got it for Xbox, my brother a copy, but he moved recently, and because he's been moving, he hasn't had a chance to play, and that's not the sad part. So I was like, well, I need to get Xbox Live so that I can play with some people, because you can play with bots. I'm like, well, bots are fun, but I want to connect and play with other humans. And I paid for Xbox Live. I plugged it in, and I was so excited. I'm like, it's $10, but it's worth it. And then I couldn't connect and find any human players. And I haven't been able to find any human players for weeks.
Aw.
And so it's just been me and my bots on Xbox. And I've even seen on Twitter, and there's people that I know on Twitter that, and outside of Twitter that use that have it for PlayStation. But well, we can't crossplay. The reason why is they don't have a quick play. And so you have to be on at the right time when somebody else is trying to join. You have a 30-second window, and they have to want to be playing your same match. So there are probably a lot of people that want to play, but there's no easy way to quick connect. They're supposed to fix that. But in the meantime, I'm playing just with the bots.
All alone. That bummed me out.
And the bots honestly they're fairly good. The more difficult the mission, it becomes difficult for the bots, but they do pretty damn well. The game is excellent for people who are fans of the Alien series. They recreate the missions really well. As Isolation really recreated Alien, Fireteam Elite really recreates the feeling of Aliens and kind of that, intro as they're walking through, all those corridors, and they're kind of experiencing the aliens for the first time. But then kind of actually, like I mentioned with the role-playing game, this also merges the Prometheus universe. So we see some more of that.
Whoa.
And it's cool. It's very satisfying. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. When they had quick play, I'll play with humans. I've made it pretty far. I haven't beaten it yet, but I haven't had a lot of time to play through it. So I would highly recommend it. I just wish they had crossplay. And I've caught up on some movies. The one I do want to call out, because I don't know if we're going to have an episode on it, and there hasn't been a ton of publicity for it yet, and I think it just dropped this week, is Nightbooks on Netflix.
Is that the one I just saw with a poster that has Kristen Ritter's in it, right?
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a kids horror movie that kind of, it feels like it's along the same lines, in terms of scares and whatnot, and like a mixture of like fantasy and horror as the Goosebumps movies, but it kind of really turns it up towards the end and becomes a little nastier. So it's by the director of Brightburn, and it's produced by Ghost House, so like Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert's production company. And so it definitely has some like, it feels like sort of like Raimi doing a kids movie, and without it like feeling like it's a ripoff of Evil Dead. It feels there's like a fun but there's also seems to be like I said, like enough scares where like if an 8-year-old were to watch it, they may have nightmares about what they see throughout some of the movie. Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. I love, kids horror movies. And so if you're a kid at heart, I say give it a try. I think it has a nice message behind it, which is about, it's about this kid who gets made fun of for being a horror fan and how he overcomes that. And of course there are other people he meets as well. And I don't want to kind of give anything away, but it involves more than just him. But it's like I said, I thought it was a fun movie. And, you're looking for something new to watch, whether it's with somebody who's watching horror movies for the first time. Derek, I know you're looking for recommendations from time to time. For any of our listeners, check out Nightbooks. It was fun. It was unexpected. And so I had a chance to check that out. So I wanted to suggest that because sometimes movies don't get promoted as much on Netflix because just so much is coming out. And I feel like this is one of them. I could be wrong, but I haven't really seen a lot for it. Not as much as like, the Fear Street trilogy, for example.
Right. Yeah. That's so strange to me too. Like Netflix is. It just sounds weird. Like promo or like PR, for things. It's so like hit or miss. Like some of like the big, even like Fear Street. Like I didn't know that, that those were coming out when they did. Like I didn't even, it's like I somehow missed that. I mean, I knew it was, coming out on Netflix, but I didn't even know like the release dates because like they didn't really like promote that well.
Yeah, and it's tough because there's just so much coming out. By the time it's released, the next thing is coming out. If it's not coming out, from Netflix itself, it's coming out from another studio in theaters or on Amazon.
Right.
Or whatever the case may be.
You have to check that out.
So it's like
Nightbooks.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, Nightbooks. Yeah, it's a fun one.
It sounds a lot like the premise for the Tales from the Dark Side, the movie wraparound story with Matthew Lawrence.
Yes, it definitely seems it is based on a book that came out recently. But you are right. The difference between Nightbooks and this is in Nightbooks, he tells a story in Tales from the Dark Side, the kid tells a story to avoid being killed from her book. And in this, he's telling stories he comes up with himself to keep himself safe. So he is a young horror writer and he comes up with a new story every night. And as long as he can, he stays alive.
Wow.
Derek,
that's motivation.
So
Derek was just looking for an excuse to mention one of the Lawrence brothers.
That's probably true.
You got me. Yeah, that is that may have had something to do with it, but there is still a similarity though too.
Yeah, but anyway, it's been good catching up with the three of you and hearing what you've been up to this summer. But yeah, and I hope all of our Corpse Club listeners are doing well. I know it's like I said, it's been a little bit. It's kind of a strange time right now. And I mean, that's an understatement, but I think it's kind of weird for me because in some respects, things are going back to normal or certain people or companies or whatever the case may be acting like things are back to normal. But the truth of the matter is that a significant amount of people, over 1,000 people, are still dying every day. And it's terrible, right? And so, I know in a lot of cases, I mean, for me, it can be overloading or overwhelming, for days or weeks at a time. And, we're not out of this stuff yet. And so anyway, so I look forward to catching up with all three of you and hearing about the good stuff going on.
Yes.
And I hope for our listeners that good things are happening for you. If they're not, I hope that things get better soon. I do want to remind everybody, you know, if you're listening, if you haven't had a chance to get vaccinated, please. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. And also I'd say, you know, if you have a stubborn relative, a stubborn friend, push them to get vaccinated, push them to get it. It's, you know, it does save lives. And so, you know, I feel like, again, we're kind of so far into this now. It's been over, you know, more than a year and a half. And, you know, sometimes we can get, you know, numb to it, or, you know, sometimes, you know, we may not hear people reminding or saying, why do you keep pushing this stuff? But it literally is saving people's lives. The majority of people who are going to the hospital, it's because they weren't vaccinated. And my grandfather didn't have the opportunity. He missed the vaccine coming out because it was, you know, last year, by a couple of weeks. Otherwise he'd still be here. So, please, if you could do anything for me, and, is don't let that happen to you. Take care of yourself, take care of your family. And yeah, I hope everything, gets much better soon.
Yes.
You know, I mean, and one of the things that we do here is, you know, you may say, well, why are, you know, with everything, you know, so crazy out in the world, you know, why even focus on horror and focus on entertainment? It's because, you know, things are terrible out there. And sometimes, you know, it can't be all bad. Sometimes we need, whether it's escape or whether it's entertainment or whether it's spending time with family and loved ones, people turn to different things. It might be a sports game. It might be, you know, going fishing. It may be playing games together, whatever the case may be. For us here at Corpse Club, a lot of us turn to horror, and that may be weird to some people, but, you know, I know for the people listening right now, it's, you know, you're right at home there with us. And so something I've been excited about for, I mean, the whole year, since last year it was announced, was James Wan's Malignant. And it's directed by James Wan. It's written, it has story credits. So between the story and the script, it involves James Wan, Ingrid Bisu, and Akela Cooper. And so they're the creative forces behind this. And, you know, it's exciting because James Wan I mean, he was a master of horror, which is, it's interesting because, I mean, if you follow his career, you know, I mean, he was a master of horror after probably having just done Saw, right? Everybody would remember him for that. You consider him a master of horror. And, you know, and Dead Silence has taken a while to catch on, but I think that's, you know, that has a cult following now. I always loved that movie. Give me Killer Dolls any day. And then Insidious came around. It's like, oh, he's back. And, which is my favorite James Wan movie. And then The Conjuring. And, you know, so it's like, so what's next from him? You know, he did The Conjuring 2. And so I think, you know, everybody kind of turned to him to see what was going to be next. He's definitely an eclectic director because he can give you a very, you know, he comes from a place where it's a little more modern, a little grittier with Saw, but something that we can dive into more, feel free, is that I think it's interesting because even Saw, even though it's filmed in a more modern way, has like harkens back to older movies. And, you know, specifically some of the stuff from like Dr. Phibes. We were talking about Vincent Price earlier. Like Phibes is kind of like a blueprint for what Jigsaw would be in those Saw movies. They just streamline the story a little bit. And the Conjuring movies certainly, you know, I'll go back to Insidious. Insidious pays, you know, homage to things like Poltergeist and Carnival of Souls. And then with The Conjuring, you know, you can kind of look at, you know, some more of the like classical, like Amityville, Exorcist, and what he was trying to get from there. So James Wan is really a student of horror. And I find it interesting how he's able to really masterfully kind of take his influences and turn them into something completely new, which is what a lot of great creators, almost all, one could argue all great creators do, is, you take your influences, you turn it into something else. So anyway, I had been really curious to see what he'd come up with Malignant, because it's a brand new story. Is it going to be more classical? Is it going to be more modern? What's the hook going to be? And with Malignant, he gave us something which I think threw people completely for a loop, at least a lot of people. It's been a lot of talk online about it for obvious reasons. I'm going to tell our listeners that we're going to dive into spoilers because I don't know how we can discuss this movie properly without spoilers. So spoiler warning there. It's on HBO Max. If you haven't seen it, sign up for a month. We're not getting a kickback from HBO Max, but it's just worth it because it costs so much more to see a movie in theaters back in the day. It would cost me $15 or $18. It's $15 for HBO Max, and they got a new movie every month, every 2 weeks. So anyway, so I recommend checking out Malignant. I'm not gonna. Maybe you can tell where I'm leaning with the movie. I think I kind of gave it away, but I am going to, as we tend to do, I'm gonna turn it to my co-hosts. I want to hear just briefly, did you like the movie? Did you not? What do you think about it? Then we're gonna dive into some more specific topics and see where the conversation goes. But first, I just want to know where everybody kind of fits with it. So, Bryan, we'll start with you. What do you think of the movie, high level?
Okay, so I do need to give a little bit of context here. I'll try not to take 45 minutes or anything, but so I will say up front, I am lukewarm on James Wan stuff. I get the attraction to his movies. I get that he is extremely talented, but there's just certain things that don't resonate with me the way they do with other folks. I did really like Insidious. And I actually really love Aquaman because it's a big, dumb movie. But yeah, it just, I'm not super into a lot of James Wan stuff. So when I was hearing about this, when it kind of started creating a Twitter avalanche, I guess Thursday into Friday, I also tend to be one of those a-holes who start to get curmudgeonly if a lot of people just start falling over themselves talking about a movie that I maybe don't quite as much care about. That is more of a me problem than a you all problem, which I recognize. So I was coming into that with that baggage when I went into it yesterday. Then the movie wasn't working when I was trying to stream it. I don't know if it was my internet, if it was there was something going on with HBO Max. Halfway through it, my monitors decided to glitch out, so I wasn't really being it was not an enjoyable circumstance to see the movie. And then through all of that, I'm seeing kind of some of the different James Wan things that I don't really care for. For me, there's an artifice to a lot of his set designs. There's a lot of CG where I don't know that they necessarily need it. All that to say, the third act actually won me over. It is a pretty funky turn. It is a pretty wild turn. I was a fan of it. I think we'll need to have some further discussion about whether or not it was Giallo inspired or not. But I did like it primarily for the third act twist.
Sounds good. I have many questions and things to discuss. Tamika, we'll turn it to you. What do you think?
Okay. So I do really enjoy James Wan movies. Not so much the Saw. It's not really didn't really gel with me the way his other films do. But I'm with you, Jonathan. I love Dead Silence. And I've mentioned that movie to people in the past, and trying to spread the good word about Dead Silence. So it's nice to see it I guess, being talked about more. Because I've noticed that it's being, people are like discovering it for the first time, and they really enjoy it. And I really enjoy it. I think it's creepy, but that's because I just don't like dolls. I'm really freaked out by stuff like that, like genuinely. So my mother has a doll collection, like a porcelain doll collection. And every time I go over there, I just like do not look any of them in the eye. Just don't make eye contact. And I was excited for him when he did Aquaman, because I thought, okay, it's different because it's not, horror related, but I could see why he would pick something like that, I feel like it still fits with, I guess his wheelhouse in a way. So I totally got that turn, but it was just really nice to see him like come back to, just like some, I gotta say, I was a little thrown off by the marketing, which is good. It's a good thing. It's very much a good thing. And yes, that third, oh gosh, I can't wait till we get to talk about that, because I'm in love. I'm pretty sure of it. That's it. I'm in love. The third act came along and I kind of like figured out where things were going. And the third act came along and I said, oh my gosh, we're going to do it. Like, we're going to do it. So let's go. Let's see what happens.
The funny thing is that your laugh right now, and I don't laugh like you, but I was laughing like you while watching the third part of the movie. Yes. Christy was looking over at me being like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, I can't believe they're doing this. So I was like squealing, and it's unusual. I had so much fun watching it as I jump ahead in line, because I was going to have you go first, but I had to point out that basically if you want to know what I sounded like during the last part of the movie, it was Tamika's laugh.
Yeah.
And Derek, how about you?
Well, so let me just say, my friend Zach and I, we've been seeing movies every Tuesday for 10 years now. And I can confidently say that Malignant is definitely one of the most bizarre movies we've ever seen together. And I too was like, my job. I was audibly reacting. And I will say that no matter what my feelings are on the movie as a whole, James Wan definitely got a reaction out of me. And it's a movie that I will never forget, whether I want to or not. It's something that is super indelible and palpable and just sears itself into your brain. So I think he wins no matter what, just on that level alone. That being said, I also feel like watching the movie, and I'll try not to go for an hour here, but I will say it felt like watching 3 or 4 different movies. And I feel like one of those movies was done exceptionally well, and the other 3 just didn't feel like it didn't feel complete. Like it felt more of like a sampler platter or a highlight reel, maybe from other influences. But I will say, and I'm talking about that third act and some of the stuff in that third act, some of the best stuff I've seen with choreography and fight choreography and things like that. The other stuff I wasn't too keen on, but overall very memorable.
All right, so we've established our teams. It's Bryan and Derek versus Jonathan and Tamika.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow, there we go. At least it's even teams, right? 2-on-2.
Well, it depends on if one of us.
It is a Mom situation.
It depends on if.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to talk about, though, before we even talk about the movie, talk about the movie itself, I did want to talk about something that I've noticed, and I think that plays a part in, and there's no way to like quote unquote fix this. And some people could even argue that maybe it's not a problem. It's just a choice in how people want to watch it. But like, this goes to the and I know I'm going to open a huge can of worms with this. That's why I'm pausing. This goes to the discussion that was happening recently about preserving the cinema experience and watching movies in theaters. And I think the argument is sort of incorrect, because for people that are arguing that cinema, the only way that you should experience a movie is in the theater and on the big screen, and that is the cinema experience, that doesn't reflect how the world is today. Rightfully, it had been called out that there are people with disabilities that can't get out. We're in the middle of a pandemic, so we will choose not to go to the theater in many cases. And then also, even outside of that, let's say you're able to go to the theater, the amount of, and you've heard me say on the podcast, the amount of experiences I've had at the theater that have been enjoyable are slim to none. I mean, 25% maybe. The screen's right, the sound's right, people aren't texting, no one's throwing things. You know, I saw, you know, when you go to a film festival, you have people invested in that movie. I saw Hereditary at a theater or at a festival, and it was a great experience. I saw Hereditary with my brother at a local theater, and people laughed through it, and they ruined it. And so when they talk about preserving the cinema experience, I just think some people haven't experienced what other people have or may not be thinking about it. And so I think maybe some of the language or the conversation is maybe a little too like black and white. And I think it comes down to, in some cases, is experiencing the movie in the way that, and paying full attention to the movie and experiencing it in a quasi similar way to what the filmmaker intends, which is, are you able to like see it on a decent screen, and whatever that means, right? It doesn't mean you have to see it on a theater screen. It just means like, can you see what the filmmaker's intending you to see? Are you focused on what's happening? You know, can you hear or read, you know, what's there? And because what I've noticed with some of the movies, and I've seen with this, is that like, I'm very fortunate in that I have a nice home theater setup. I've invested in that instead of spending money on other things, because that's, you know, I want to be able to spend time with my family, and especially during COVID times, you know, my parents will come over and we'll have them, you know, our things. We don't go out to places, we don't go out to restaurants. We, you know, we'll watch movies. And the reason why I bring this up, and I'm spending a lot of time talking about this, is because while watching this with, you know, excessively loud sound in a darkened room, for me, I kind of loved the experience from start to finish. So it was cohesive. And like, I felt like the beginning of this movie really kind of played well. Like, the sound design is expertly executed, the scares, and like, I see Juan kind of setting us up for what would traditionally be seen as maybe like the first half of Insidious, or the first third of Insidious, or the first third of The Conjuring, kind of setting us up for that haunted house thing. But even if that was all we were going to get from the movie, it seemed to be executed very well, but in the way that maybe he intended it. But if you're watching it, you know, but depending on how you're watching it, I can see that stuff not playing, and it would be like, well, I've seen this stuff before. I'm watching this on, you know, I'm having connection issues. I'm watching this while texting. I'm watching this while doing something else. I'm not implying that any of my co-hosts were doing that, or maybe you were. It doesn't matter.
Go to hell, James.
But I think it's interesting. I remember I had an interview with Clive Barker recently, or you know, last year, and he brought it up, and it's kind of stuck in my head ever since. Is that they're fighting for people's attention because they know that they're going to be on their phone texting instead of looking up at the movie. So are they really going to be able to get them with those scares? And I spent a lot of time talking about this because I think this movie was designed for a theater experience. And so I think some of what is throwing people off of this movie and what makes it feel disjointed is that if you don't have that experience, it makes for kind of a weird watch. At least I would think so. And so I'm a long way of talking about this topic, but I'm throwing this out there to get my co-host take on it. Like, how did you feel about the first third of the movie? How did you watch the first third of it? Like, did it play well? Did you feel like this was like a great representation of like haunted house movies and tropes, or did it just all fall kind of flat?
So I'll start by saying that I'm in the camp of, I can count on one hand instances where I've seen a movie at a movie theater and I've thought, man, this only works if I'm in a movie theater. And likewise, like even fewer times where I've watched something where if I didn't like it, where I was thinking maybe if I saw this in a movie theater, I'd like it more. So for me, the theater experience is not an integral part of enjoying a movie. And I don't know, I think there's definitely a discussion to be had about to what degree, if a filmmaker is saying, well, you didn't like it because it wasn't in the movie theater. Well, it's like, for me, is that a shortcoming in your movie then? Because not everybody, like you were talking about, John, like not everybody can see it in a movie theater, and, for me, a movie watching experience isn't tied directly to going to a cinema. And I also realized, though, that is a very kind of personal experience, because for me, movies growing up were rented from the video store because we didn't go to the movie theater a whole lot. And all that to say that, the things that were an issue for me with the first third, maybe half of the movie, I don't think would have necessarily been improved if I had seen them in a movie theater. Like I said, kind of for me, there's a level of artifice to the set design that James Wan does that for some reason just that takes me out of it. Because there are times where I feel like I'm looking at a movie set, or I'm looking at a green screen with a movie set with a green screen behind it. So it's almost too polished for me, and there's a level of it level that it takes me out of it, and it kind of prevents the suspension of disbelief for me, because it's so, like, it's expertly crafted. But for me, like, I can see the craft, so I'm not getting lost in the movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And Derek, how about you?
It definitely, I think my experience wasn't really affected by that. Had a great, really close to the TV, really focused, good sound and everything. Didn't have any streaming issues, thankfully. So everything was, there was one little interruption during the movie, but other than that, we pressed pause, got right back into it after resuming it. And I always, keep my phone off and everything. So, it was all laser focused for me, but maybe too laser focused, because then I start to nitpick. For me, it was, and I know it's not really fair, but I guess I go into it thinking, it's even in the marketing, like James Wan, Insidious, The Conjuring, Saw, and I love Death Sentence is my favorite movie of his, and so that's not one that really gets talked about a lot, and that was more of a low budget kind of thing. So I go into it though with certain expectations. I think James Wan is at the point where he almost has to subvert expectations of what his fans think he's going to release. And I think this movie definitely does that, but I think it almost like tries to subvert itself intentionally so many times. And it's so, I guess when you mentioned the first third of the film, it's so oppressively gloomy, and just like the characters just feel, and it's a great performance. It's a very important story to tell, and I think Annabelle Wallis is really good in the film. But like the way it's written, like the characters are just so over the top. Like this is an archetypal character here, kind of doing something that's just so oppressively just disturbing. And I get that the story needs it to be that way, but just, I don't know, something about the dialogue and everything in that first 20 minutes, it just felt so like they're kind of workshopping some stuff, and it just didn't like it was not quite there yet or something. It just didn't feel real as it could have been, especially for the subject matter, which I think
they could
is
have
really
used,
important that was in there.
They could have used a different catalyst for kicking this off other than an abusive husband, because it kind of felt cheap. And I'm not sure if that's what you were getting at, Derek, but like the thing that kicks all this off is that the main character, I am completely blanking, Madison.
Oh, right. Yeah. Madison. Yeah.
Is in an abusive relationship. And he is kind of like an abusive husband, like caricature. And the thing that kicks this off is he actually like slams her head against a wall, and we'll get to why that's important later. But it's, I don't know, when you kick off a movie like this with kind of having that conversation, I don't know, there was just something about it. Like there was another way I think they could have done that.
Yeah, that was kind of like that was like one movie, you know, like the first 20 minutes is and then even the first 10 minutes. And that is kind of definitely what I think you really encapsulated that well for me. And the first 10 minutes is also kind of its own movie. And that kind of feels very much like this early 2000s in your face kind of horror movie that we saw a lot of in that time period. And so it was so like a jarring tonal shift to go from in your face kind of psychiatric horror to very gloomy domestic drama. And then we go into yet another story after that where it's more of like a haunted house story. And then from there I would go into, I don't want to get too far out of myself, I would say we even get into like a superhero or an anti-hero kind of Spawn type story. And so for me, it was just like, it didn't really hit for me until that third act when I couldn't ignore how awesome they pulled off those stunts. But until then, it was so hard to like wrap my head around what I was watching, because I feel tonally that it shifted so dramatically, like every 15 to 20 minutes. It was just hard to like buy into it, I guess.
Well, yeah, the third act is where the movie becomes confident in what it is, because it's pulled back the curtain. So yeah, I think Derek, I think everything he's doing up until that point is deliberate, because I think there's a lot of subterfuge going on, but that it created a lot of what kind of just, it came out as almost like tentativeness in terms of what kind of movie it was until that third act.
Mm-hmm. Tamika, how did that first third of the movie work for you?
Yeah, so I completely hear everyone's, critiques, and, they're all very obviously, fair and valid, for sure. I think it's something Derek said about how it felt very like early 2000s. I agree with that. Oh, very much. It very much reminded me of, like horror movies from that time, where the tone, I think that's maybe why I gelled with the tone. Maybe more so, because I felt like that tone was intentional. The tone was intentional, and, it felt very on purpose to be very kind of like early 2000s, like, sorry, apologies for that. Camp, like it felt very intentional, like camp, and very like I'm trying to think of, almost like the movie from what's a ghost? What are ghosts called? Not The Entity, something else.
Oh, 13 Ghosts.
Oh no, it's like it's like another name for a ghost. Like Oh,
I
not like, it's not like, it's like a bigger word. And of course, now I can't even think of it. It's not entity. It's not that. Apparition. The
yes.
apparition. Yeah. From, I think, 2006.
Oh, I remember that movie. Yeah.
Yeah. It has that like early to mid to 2000s vibe to it, but I felt like that was intentional, you know? But I do, and you know, so it hits all of those beats, you know, like the melodrama, and then like trying to set up the characters, but in kind of like a I don't know, kind of like a, not, I don't want to use the word shallow because it's not that, but it's very kind of like surface level, you know, like setup for the characters, because it's just trying to hold back as much as it can until it gets, you know, at least like towards the back end of the movie where they just, everything just goes insane, you know? So I think maybe that's why, you know, I was okay with that, because I kind of thought maybe that was the intention behind it from the beginning, you know? But no, I do understand, you know, how it, you know, if you're going to be campy like that, you know, to maybe handle things, more serious things in a different way. Like I totally see that. But yeah, I think that's why, even though the marketing, because I mentioned that, even though I think the marketing threw me, because I expected something more like Insidious, like some type of like a haunting.
Yeah.
I really don't like films like that. So when it just kind of from the beginning kind of felt like, oh no, when I do, okay, yes, oh, yes, I might actually like this. Yeah. So
yeah,
I
find
think
it's so interesting that,
yeah,
you know, I mean, James Wan could make whatever he wanted. And I mean, a lot of what he does here, I mean, is very intentional. But the fact that he made this movie, I mean, is just, I mean, there's very few people that would be allowed to make this movie for this budget, you know? And this was, I guess this is a thank you for, you know, the Conjuring movies and Aquaman from Warner Brothers to kind of allow him to do this without, you know, seemingly any oversight, because I don't think, you know, again, this is the kind of stuff that you'd get from like Frank Henenlotter, right? This kind of stuff we'd see in Brain Damage or Basket Case.
He made a $40 million Grindhouse movie.
He really did. But the great thing, I mean, the great thing about it that I love though is that he made one of these movies, but without. I don't have a fully formed example at this moment, so I'm going to use this with a caveat. Is that I do like, you know, a lot of what's in the Grindhouse movie, but like if you look at like how Grindhouse the film is like framed with like the trailers and stuff like that, like it's very obviously paying homage to what's come in the past without necessarily fitting in perfectly, like especially like Planet Terror. Whereas this movie feels like it's what Frank Henenlotter would have done with more of a budget. You know what I mean? Like this kind of
he made a Grindhouse movie without having to bring attention to like, hey, look at me, I'm making a Grindhouse movie.
Exactly. Yeah, that's thank you for saying it in a lot more succinctly than I did. And I mean that. And so yeah, that's exactly it. And so I think it's cool that we even got this movie. I mean, this movie shouldn't exist. But it was fun to watch because I knew we've talked about the marketing a little bit. I knew there was something different coming ahead from what I had heard already. And Christy, who was watching this with me at the time, had no idea what to expect. So when she was watching it, you know, she was kind of watching it play as if it were like maybe a little more as intended, right? Which is like get the haunted house piece and like, oh, it's not a haunted house movie anymore. So it was interesting, and she enjoyed it just as much, but it was interesting to see her experience as opposed to mine, which is like, mine is like, where are you taking this? Well, like, I know what you showed me in the beginning, so clearly, like, I know where we're headed. I loved how much it was like a dark castle film. And maybe that'll take us to our next topic. We could talk forever if we wanted, but
one last thing on that though, I think I wonder how much I would have appreciated the trajectory of the film. I knew there was going to be a big third act pivot just because of like people were going nuts for it on Twitter. I didn't catch exactly what the pivot was. So basically I'm spending most of the movie waiting for the pivot. And so the first two acts for me are more kind of like filler. So that might have actually also been a detriment for kind of the way I viewed the movie.
And it goes back to what you were saying. And I totally agree with that, because I think it didn't necessarily hamper my enjoyment, but it did. I was thinking about it as I was watching it and trying to figure out what was coming up. And there's no.
I was annoying the crap out of Scott because I was texting him. I'm like, oh, is this what's going on? Is this what's going on the whole time? Which, then I'm inherently looking and texting on my phone, which is, what we were talking about is like not the goal of the movie. But again, not necessarily, that's more kind of circumstance than the filmmaker's fault.
Yeah. And the thing too is, and a filmmaker, and that goes back a little bit to the topic I had, where a filmmaker, and something you brought up too, Bryan, I want to credit you, is that a filmmaker doesn't have control over how their film is really going to be viewed. So saying it's only intended to be viewed a certain way or you won't appreciate it, that doesn't really hold up. And so I think that even if a film doesn't work under certain circumstances, the truth of the matter is that people are going to watch it, even if we're not talking about the experience of watching it, which is like, am I on my phone? Am I not? Am I at a theater? Am I not? Am I watching it on a large TV, a small TV, a tablet, projected, 4K, DVD? There's also the marketing, which, the filmmaker only has so much control over. So I did want to talk about that a little bit where, and I don't watch trailers, so I don't have a lot to add to this. Like, I know I will go see the movie. So like, I didn't know what this movie was about. I knew because again, there was just a lot of chatter about it that, and Heather had her early review. So like, I knew something was coming in the third act, but I didn't watch the trailer, and I had only seen like some of the marketing materials and the poster and the some of the stills that had been released. And so a lot of people had talked about, whether this movie is giallo or not. And I did want to get my co-host take. I feel, and as I had kind of alluded to, this movie is much closer to a Dark Castle movie. I see this movie's, and kind of like when I mentioned Insidious has things that call back to Poltergeist, but they also have things that call back to Carnival of Souls. They also have things that call back to Dead of Night, the anthology film. And so it's a mix of influences. And so I don't feel like this movie, to me, and I am no expert, I'll be the first to say that, but to me, I don't feel like this movie is necessarily a giallo film through and through, but I do see elements of where giallo films may have inspired him in some of the paths that he took, whether it be some of and I figured out a way to bring this to the upcoming topic, the second act, when we're doing a lot more of the detective work, and also in terms of maybe how the kills are set up. I know in terms of like the fact that we focus on the weapons that are used or the gloves or the outfit. And then also in terms of some of the uses of, and then I know some people will like point out to some of the uses of color. And so I can see where you'd say, hey, this does have elements of a giallo movie, but I wouldn't necessarily say this is a giallo movie. But I'm curious to hear everybody else's take. I'm not going to pick on you individually because maybe you're thinking about this, and I'm just going to say whoever wants to go first, you can just jump in.
I don't think so. I mean, I agree. I think it's more reminiscent, especially because of that house is this is slightly off topic, but almost every, horror movie, especially from like that time, the 90s, like 2000s, everyone lives in some ginormous home. It's like, what are you doing for a living? You're just living in this, like, it's not even a McMansion. It's like a mini castle.
And also I can speak with authority on this, having just moved to Seattle in the past year. Real estate is ridiculously expensive around here. So that house that you're looking at is like probably high 6 figures, approaching 7 figures.
Exactly. It's like, so I mean, are you what were you like a dignitary? Are we on the low? Like, is that what we're doing? Like, 'cause there's no way, like, a teacher's salary, you're living in a mini castle. But just that the home is just so big, and I'm not big on architecture, so I'm probably, getting this style of home, wrong. But it reminds me of like almost like a mix of like modern with maybe like Edwardian or something, with just like the roofs, like the way like the roof looks and stuff. But so yeah, it just reminds me of those like old, like a William Castle movie or something, like that mixed with like, the early mid 2000s aesthetic. I try not to use that word, but I couldn't help it. It just felt right. It felt appropriate. Aesthetic.
It sounded good.
Yes. So I agree. I mean, I really don't see it. I mean, but I mean, so is it more because of just how, I don't want to say, I guess, I don't want to say outlandish. It's not that. It's very.
I think it had to do, or at least started with like some of the marketing materials, so like the posters, the focus on the gloved killer with the, with that golden blade. And, and I guess I will say ahead of time that like all of this, and what I go back to, because I do want to make sure that it comes off as, everything we're talking about here isn't definitive, right? This is all of our opinions. Right. And one of the big things I want to say is too, for our listeners, you could be like, well, I think it's a giallo film, and that's great. It can be all kinds of different buckets. So I do want to kind of point that out too, is that, by talking about this, it's certainly a topic that's been online, and I'm interested in my co-host's opinion, but also it can be multiple things. It can be giallo, and it can be Dark Castle, or it could be something completely different to you. I mean, and I think that's the point I was making earlier, is that the fact that like James Wan was influenced by a ton of different movies. So if you are to say it was influenced by this, and this, like, that's totally cool. It can be multiple buckets. I always think about the person that said that like The Shining, told me The Shining isn't a horror movie, or told my sister that The Shining isn't a horror movie. It's an isolation thriller. And I'm like, it's an isolation thriller, but it can't be a horror movie. It can't be. And so I'm like, it can be both. You can have it as like an isolation thriller. Like, I'm not going to tell you not to have it, like not to bucket it that way. It can be both. Like, why can't we be happy? But anyway, back to the original kind of question at hand. Bryan, Derek, do you see the giallo influences? Do you feel like this leans more that way, or do you see something else?
And to piggyback on what you said, I don't think there's any wrong way to interpret this movie. I think there's a million different ways to enjoy the film. I guess for me, and kind of going to the giallo question, for me, the issue is that it's, with Wan's previous films, it was always like he went all in on doing like the best version of one type of subgenre. And I feel like in this one, we get like 4 different subgenres, including, I would say, the giallo genre, I guess you could say. But it doesn't feel, the problem with that I have is that, or I guess it's not a problem. I mean, I still had fun with the movie, but the thing I take away from it is like with the giallo influences, it's like, okay, they, with the weapon, which I love, the weapon, how they use this symbolism of like a trophy for surgery, and they kind of right that wrong by using that to get justice. I think that's a really cool weapon to incorporate into the story. And then of course you have the black gloves, you have the long hair, you can't see the face, so the leather jacket. There's a lot of like giallo things there, but then it's also like, it just feels like yet another kind of pit stop on this highway of cinematic influences. And I really feel like, and this is of course just one of, hundreds of opinions you could take away from the movie. I feel like the movie is like an anti-hero, almost like a villain origin story from like a superhero movie, because I feel like this would be a villain that you would find in a superhero movie. So I feel, and it doesn't really embrace that until the third act. So I feel like the giallo stuff is there, but it's just yet another thing to throw us off. Like it's like you mentioned, they used it in the marketing. I kind of, for that reason, I went into it kind of thinking it would be a giallo film. And it's that, just like the haunted house aspect of it, it's just another thing to kind of throw us off of the scent of what the movie really is. So I guess it is a giallo film and it isn't. And you're really not right or wrong either way.
That is really interesting what you brought up about the
Are you running for office, Derek?
Yeah. I'm not trying to upset anybody or please anybody.
That's funny. But no, I like what you brought up about the anti-hero aspect. I didn't think about it too much, but and it's something, it is something that we saw with Jigsaw. And this goes back to the, and again, kind of tying influence. This goes back to the Dr. Phibes influence. I don't want to spoil it too much because I know, Brian, we're going to see it. But this goes back to the Dr. Phibes influence, in that he's doing it for what he sees as the right reason, even if it may not be. And so while I didn't think about it while watching it, this is kind of similar to that, because Phibes goes after doctors. So what we do see, that same influence we see in Saw, which is really cool. And this is why I love these discussions, by the way, is because, you can bring up a little tidbit that, maybe you thought was a throwaway, or that somebody would, and it just, it sparks a whole new conversation or thought. Like, I didn't even think about that point of view. And so it's interesting to kind of see him kind of reuse that influence, in this film. But anyway, Brian, how about you?
So I will say that I don't think, had I gone into this and hadn't heard people talking about how they thought it was a giallo influenced movie, I don't think I would have come to that conclusion on myself. I can see people's point in terms of the giallo influences. Actually, it's funny, the thing that kept coming up for me was Argento's Phenomena, which is interesting because that's kind of one of his least ultimately giallo movies, or it's a giallo that mixes in other elements. I guess you could argue that Suspiria is probably his least ultimately giallo movie. Yeah, it's because you have, you're introduced to this kind of altered entity, similar to how, spoiler alert for Phenomena, you realize that kind of the motivation for the killer in the movie is she's protecting her son, who's kind of like this half boy, half monster who's in the basement. So I was getting some of those vibes at it. And there's definitely, while you do realize there's a realistic psychological element to it, there's definitely still supernatural elements to it as well, which is also something that you get in Phenomena. So that was, in terms of the realm of giallo, that was the one I was connecting to the most. But I think, like everybody else has been saying, it's such a grab bag. There's a lot of different influences, and actually one that popped out for me a couple of times was I was getting Hereditary vibes from the visuals. At one point, during the flashback for Madison's character, who I guess winds up, I think her real name is Emily, you see a shot of her as a kid in front of a dollhouse that had kind of that miniature house vibe from Hereditary. And there's also that whole scene where she's running through the house and you're seeing it from above, which I actually thought was a pretty cool piece of camera work, because you're following her through, and the camera is kind of impossibly going through these sections of the house. That was pretty neat. But that kind of very square and streamlined and kind of like right angle kind of feel to that scene, for some reason also was giving me Hereditary vibes. So yeah, I just think it's there's so much in there. It's hard for me to say it's any one style of movie.
And I will say, I definitely got like House on Haunted Hill remake 1999 vibes from the whole opening.
Oh yeah,
scene.
That's the first thing Christy said.
Especially when Owen Wilson comes out of nowhere.
The House on Haunted Hill.
Sorry.
The other remake from that era. And yeah, it's so there's a lot of aesthetics. There's a lot going on. And again, I was nitpicking, but Zach and I kind of looked at each other and we're like, when it said present day and she pulled up in like that early 80s station wagon, because of course it just has to be like a really old car. Like everything was so intense in that first 20 minutes. It's like super old car. The house is like 100 years old, because of course it is, it always is. And then when we find out that all this stuff's been happening in the attic, there's like this giant industrial fan up there. And I know I'm nitpicking, but it just kept adding up for me, where I kept thinking like, oh, come on. There's ways to like, because I felt like we were in the 80s until I saw some like modern day cars and things like that. And it just almost would have been refreshing to get something a little bit different there, I guess. But it's one of those things where just the little things just kept piling up for me. So by the time I got to the end of the movie, I was just kind of like, man, everything about it just, I'm like, because I loved the third act so much, I was just like, why couldn't that have been the whole movie? But maybe that's the point. Maybe that you don't get that jaw drop unless you get kind of, led a different way the whole movie until that moment.
It's interesting what you say about the time frame, because I questioned it and I forgot that we had seen cell phones. The reason it happened to me when they're looking at when they're watching the VHS tapes at the adopted mom's house. And she has a stack of VHS tapes behind her. Like the wall is just covered in them. And I'm just like, when is and then I forgot that we had seen a cell phone being used to record something in the police station. And I'm like, oh, so like this is still now. But yeah, definitely like this movie doesn't embrace new technology so much so that it made me question it for a minute. Almost kind of in the same way Texas Chainsaw 3D did it.
I will say that was kind of a detriment for me, because it goes back to that idea of like them making it, Wan making it like capital S spooky. Like it just leaned too hard into, again, there's for me a layer of artifice to it. Like, yeah, with the police station, I'm like, what police station looks like this? And it hadn't leaned into I guess by that point it kind of leaned into the nuttiness enough, but it was still kind of in that realm of it hadn't gone so kind of overboard that it just like, when movies are willing to go like way overboard and just kind of, you realize it's that kind of movie, then you're kind of willing to let a lot of that go. But it was still kind of in that tone of seeing a police station like that was just kind of throwing me off, because it's like, where in Seattle would this police department be?
A very gothic police station with very high ceilings. And I get it. It's like, I guess, yeah, the production design does become kind of another character in the movie when you have like the underground aspect of it and the chariots, and there's so much leaning into the physical environment and everything with this film. And so it did that. I almost feel like I would have enjoyed it more if they just said, okay, it's in the 90s, like it's set in 1998 and we're doing that type of movie or something. But I just kept thinking like it was almost a distraction in some ways. And it's a very talented crew that puts this together. Like the cinematography is just amazing. It's a visual feast on so many levels. It's very competently made. But like Bryan was saying, it's almost like too polished in some instances, or like leans into the gothic atmosphere a little bit, where I'm kind of like, wait, what era are we in? But it's fun though too.
So I think we've talked enough about we've at least like touched upon the second act, because I'm just dying to get into the third. So we're just going to jump right into it. And feel free to talk about some of the stuff in the second act if you want as well. But I think as we've all alluded to, whether we like the entire movie or we weren't sure up until the third act, like that's what sells this movie. I think there's so much to talk about it, because an interesting aspect is certainly what you brought up, Derek, that it becomes almost like the superhero movie. There is like the amount of action and choreographed fight sequences, and it just amps this movie to a level that I never expected it to go to. It was just it went from like a 5 to an 11. And it was
pretty spry for a tumor.
Yeah. And it's just, yeah, it's crazy. I'm still in awe that this movie got made. But while I collect my thoughts, let me turn it over to Tamika. We heard from you in a minute. So, what did you think about the finale of the movie, or the last third?
I gotta say, I mean, I won't say I was surprised, because I figured that one of two things was happening. And either I thought it was like a situation where, okay, so I thought that it could either be her, but she just doesn't like remember, it's her doing these things, or it's just a really dark version of Inside Out, where, what's the imaginary friend's name? Bing Bong or something like that. I think that was its name. And it died because like the girl like grew up, and so she like gave up like her imaginary friend. So it was like starting to die. Bing Bong. That was its name. Yeah. I'm not making that up. And so I thought maybe it was like that, like she had this imaginary friend. And then, as you grow up, you let go of those things and you mature, and and so the imaginary friend, like somehow like became like real, like it wasn't imaginary anymore. So when we get to that third act and you piece together that they're like, that it's like a twin, like it's her twin, but she absorbed it. Oh God. And then like it like and it was like taking over her body. I could not help but giggle. Like I don't mean to do that like high-pitched laugh that I do, but it's just like it comes from just sheer enjoyment. It's just like I just like it just took it to like a whole other level. I'm like, oh yes, okay, yeah, we're fully embracing camp now. It's like as I think it was kind of like maybe subtle in the beginning, or maybe not. I don't know. It felt like very like obvious to me, but I don't know. That's just, my interpretation of it. But it just went full high key camp in the end. And I was just so impressed with how like it was pulled off, really, because that can, I mean, I know it looks kind of silly, but also it looks really badass. And so that's kind of like a level, like a skill level. There's some like skill involved in that, where it doesn't look like fully silly the whole time. Like, what are we? This is not good, And it's that perfect amount of like just silly and badass all at the same time. And it got me because I thought that I had figured out what was happening. So I appreciated it. I really loved it a lot. I high-pitched giggled the entire time.
Derek, did you have it figured out?
When we were watching it, we kind of were starting to put some pieces together, and knowing that there was going to be that third act twist definitely clued us in a little bit. But so we'd kind of, by that point, I'd kind of figured out that, there was this connection, but I did not think that they were going to go as far as they did with it. And the reaction of the mom and the sister when they're watching the tape at her house and they like audibly react and they're gasping, like that was my reaction. It felt like they were the voice for the audience in that moment. And just the way they splice that together with the whole jail cell reveal, I thought was so brilliant and just way more body horror than I expected. I'm glad that part of the surprise wasn't ruined for me. I didn't know, like I assumed that Gabriel was going to have a very shocking kind of reveal based on some of the Twitter reactions, but I did not know that it was actually going to come out of her own head and literally like not just possess her, but basically become her. That was really cool. And the way that they actually did that and the stunt work that they did in camera with the really talented people that they worked with, that was amazing. So I was also audibly reacting and just, I thought it was such a spectacle, the whole jail cell and then later the police precinct fight. Like that was some of the best in-camera fight work I've seen in a long time. And I love how he shot it. I love how it was, you could see everything that was happening. It wasn't shaky cam. Like it was just that was certainly one of the more memorable moments I've had watching a movie in a long time, was just the whole reveal.
Like I said, I knew there was going to be a pivot. I had some sense of what the pivot might be because someone had mentioned, like, I can't believe they let Juan like make a version of Fight Club or something like that. So there was a nod to it being between that and the fact that they were playing the musical cue of Where Is My Mind as kind of like the stinger to a lot of scenes. I knew it was going to be something where she was more involved, like she was more intertwined with what was going on. I didn't know exactly how it was going to manifest itself. It was obviously something because it's called Malignant. They talk about cutting this cancer out at the beginning. I thought, I figured there was going to be some sense of like him controlling her, but like the way it manifested itself, if anybody, I doubt there was anybody who said like, yes, from the very beginning, I knew that a sentient tumor comes out of the back of her head, distorts her in such a way so that like he can use her body and enact his, I don't know, quasi supernatural revenge on the people he sees as having wronged him. I don't think a lot of people would have guessed the specifics in terms of how that panned out, and I definitely did not. Tamika, you had mentioned, just to kind of pick up on, that it looks a little bit silly in terms of the effects for when Gabriel takes over and she kind of goes into like reverse mode. The thing that I noticed when I was watching it is that it did look a little, for lack of a better term, crappy in terms of like her face very much just looked like they put a mask of the actress, I guess Annabelle Wallis, on the back of whoever was doing this work, the stunt work. But it's almost like, looking back on it, how we're talking about how deliberate Wan was with everything leading up to it. If you're kind of going into that campy, over the top grindhouse feel, that's what that would have looked like. It would have been kind of a crappy mask on the back of someone's head. So it's kind of blending, the more modern effects while still kind of keeping that aesthetic of this is kind of campy, which means it looks a little bit ridiculous. So I have to think that was also deliberate.
Yeah.
You got Derek.
Oh, just want a quick shout out. There's Heather was part of an interview where James Wan talks about how they brought Gabriel to life on Daily Dead. You can find that. And he talks about working with Marina Mazeppa, who did a lot of the performances when Gabriel takes over the body. And then Troy James also did some of the contortionist work. But yeah, he talks about how they had the mask of basically like a mask of Annabelle Wallis's face on her on one side of her head, and then like the Gabriel prosthetic on the other side. So yeah, if you want to know some more about that, it's pretty interesting hearing the whole process of that and how they brought that to life.
Yeah, I mean that whole scene was pretty incredible. I did not guess, by the way. I thought he was detached the whole time up until that, or I thought maybe he left and then sometimes came back. I didn't know he was fused and she was running around. And again, this is kind of why I go back to, like, even if you didn't like this movie, and maybe, and I guess that's kind of the hope too with, with our listeners, maybe you hated this movie, but you're still listening to us talk about it, and thank you if that's the case. And, but I hopefully, there you get some different points of view, and maybe it makes you think at least a little bit about, even if you don't like something about all the people that worked on it or the care they put into it or what they were going for. Because I think the thing with this is that even if it's not something that you like 100%, then, very often does anybody like anything 100%, but, it's, like I said, there was a lot of intention here, but I think one of the interesting things is that, you're not going to get like this kind of budget and this kind of experienced filmmaker working on a scene like this. I mean, this is, Marvel or DC level choreography. I mean, he worked on a Fast and Furious movie. So he's bringing Hollywood blockbuster, approach to this, fight in the police station. And that's why it's just so incredible to watch, because a lot of your 80s directors may have had scenes like this cooked up in their head, but they could never execute it. They just, the talent wasn't there. The methods of filmmaking may not have been there. And being able to have people contort and be able to have the choreography just so perfect. Like this is like I said, this is a superhero, and credit to Derek, but this is superhero level execution. And we're seeing it, like I said, on screen for this horror movie that shouldn't exist. And that's what I think is so incredible. I got the biggest laugh. Tamika laughed at the end of the fight when Gabriel has taken out almost all the police officers, has cut up both of the main cops. They are staggering away to leave.
They're throw.
And yeah, Gabriel just takes that chair and just zones in on them from so far. Like it was such a pointless attack.
It was petty. It was delightfully petty.
I got so much joy out of that scene because I'm like, they have given up. They are wounded. They are retreating, and he can just run away at any time. It's like, no, I'm gonna throw this chair at you still. I got such a laugh out of that. You can hear I'm lying through now, but I was gleefully giggling. Christy was looking at me. I'm like, I mean, I probably had tears in my eye. It was just like, you can just imagine. I'd love to take a look at the script because I don't know if it was in the script or it was just during filming, but whoever came up with that scene, it was just like a little added bit of just just greatness, because that didn't need to be there. He could have ran away and everybody would have been like, wow, that was great. But that chair, oh, anyway.
And it's like, it's not even just played for a goof, because if I remember correctly, like you see some blood splatter, like they both survive it, but like whoever got like dinged with it, like it did some damage. It didn't just knock them over.
No, it was, there's no need for it.
There's a definite sense of humor, like with things like that. And as dark as a movie as it can be at times, like it almost is like James and his creative team are kind of winking at the camera, but then I'm also confused because tonally it's another tonal shift where I'm like, wait a minute, is this, especially with the police detective and his character, and he brings some comic relief to it and everything. But I'm just like, wait, where did that come from? And it's like so many layers to try and process that it's almost like too much for me. But it is interesting because you mentioned the superhero aspect again, and James Wan even took to his own Facebook page a couple of years ago because some readers or listeners may know he had like a comic book series called Malignant Man that came out a while ago, where it's about a guy who has like a parasitic tumor that gives him special abilities, and it's kind of like a mystery involved there too. And he kind of like went to Facebook and said, this is separate from that. It's definitely, as he quote in quotations, it's definitely not a superhero film. So talking about the Malignant that just came out. And so I'm kind of like, wait a minute, though, this totally feels like a superhero movie in the last third, because it goes into full blown like action, like almost like Matrix, V for Vendetta type action there in the police precinct, where I don't know, I just feels like that's undeniable. Like that is such a part of its DNA, or even like an early 2000s Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. Like it totally is giving me off those vibes to me. But I guess it's all up for interpretation.
Yeah, and there also probably is an element of, in that comment, of him not wanting to give anything away. If you were to ask him now, I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would comment on the superhero influence of that police segment.
Yeah, it's intriguing. And then the poor the guy who has the love, kind of the romantic interest with the sister. We see, there's like a question mark. He really goes to the ringer in the movie, and then even gets stabbed towards the end with the kind of makeshift dagger. And I'm kind of like, I didn't get any closure with this character, because I'm not sure if he survived that. Like he got stabbed pretty good there at the end.
I think the whole ending is interesting and not giving closure, because it's like, yeah, she's kept him at bay. They've already hinted at the fact that like that might not last forever. They both, the sisters are kind of hugging on the hospital floor, but like, even if, like, let's say that is the absolute last you hear from Gabriel, how the hell are you going to explain that, like, yeah, this evil cancerous twin was controlling my actions when I slaughtered an entire police station, but I'm okay now. Like, and I also say that to the deliberateness, I think, in terms of like, yeah, that's how like a grindhouse movie would end. Like they beat the bad guy and it's like quote unquote happy ending, unless you think about it for more than 2 minutes and you realize like, yeah, her life is over. Like she's not going to have anything resembling a normal life after wiping out an entire police station and having everybody, like, even if that cop survives, like, yes, there is an explanation for it, but yes, there is also the, like, okay, so what happens if she hits her head again and Gabriel comes back?
Yeah, after the movie, I just told Christy, like, they're going to have to develop all new laws to keep her out of jail and keep her from being locked up. And I'm like, like, perspective is so interesting, right? Because we're following her and her family and that story. And for them, it's a happy ending. But the betrayal of bodies, the, parentless children because of the police massacre, it's just like so many people died And yes,
like whose fingerprints and whose DNA is going to be all over those crime scenes.
Exactly. So yeah, and I guess as we kind of, close out talking about this movie and talking about the finale, is that like, they certainly leave it open for a sequel. I don't think I need one. I don't know if I want one. I don't think I should say the most important thing is I don't think we're going to get one. But, I'm real happy that that Warner Brothers seemingly gave James Wan a blank check for this and complete creative freedom, because what a crazy ride this was. I loved it.
Malignant 2. Could you imagine?
I mean, it might not take much, a fall on the floor, a bump on the head, fall off your bike.
What if it was a group of people like sympathetic to Gabriel? So there's people who like pop out of nowhere and try and hit her in the back of the head to try and like revive him.
See, that's the thing is, that's where it feels like if they ever did sequelize it, it does go into that super anti-hero, superhero, even like Suicide Squad type character, because like, even if for whatever reason she doesn't go to prison, like the government's not going to let her go out in public. Like they're going to use that. They're going to like try and bring Gabriel out for like top secret missions. They're not going to let her out of like containment.
I like
she'll never have a normal life.
Oh my God,
again.
I want to see this movie all of a sudden.
I know.
Well, Warner Brothers is doing, or HBO Max is doing the Peacemaker series at like extension of Suicide Squad. So like maybe they can get James Wan and James Gunn in a room together and they can figure something out.
It turns into like this messed up like buddy movie, like between Annabelle Wallace's character and Gabriel, where it's like, they have to kind of like live with each other in this circumstance.
It's Venom. It's a Venom movie all along. It's just like Life. Remember when Life came out and everyone's like, it's secretly a Venom movie? That's what this is. This is the next Venom villain after Carnage. I guarantee it. Oh my God.
I guarantee you.
I like that last part.
Folks.
Yeah.
I guarantee it.
I wasn't going to say anything, Brian. I was just going to leave it.
Wow. Oh my goodness. But it reminds me too of Brightburn, right? Because Brightburn ended on this big kind of cliffhanger of like, we just saw like the beginning of this like evil kid who's going to grow up to become like this villain. And like, we got a tease of what a sequel might look like based on kind of the destruction that he's starting to wreak on the world. So it almost feels like that kind of setup where I don't think we'll ever necessarily get a sequel to Brightburn. I don't think we're going to get a sequel to this, but it makes you think though, like maybe they'll do a comic book or something one day where they, pick up where it left off. But I think she'd have to go on, if she wants to like have her independence, I think she has to go underground and just go on the run, because there's no way that like you said, Brian, there's no way you can go back to that house and live a normal life.
I guess I'll slightly retract some of my previous statements and say that we could get a sequel. and the reason why is because even if this movie breaks even, doesn't make a lot of money, like it doesn't really matter, because James Wan has so much clout and HBO Max is still looking for streaming options. So what you brought up is a good point about a series, but they could even do a one-off movie. Like if James Wan really wanted to do it and maybe reduce the budget a little bit, or maybe he makes, maybe he's doing Aquaman 2, so maybe that's a huge hit and he wants to do, stay with the Malignant franchise. If this is something he wants to make sequels of, and we know he does with his other films, then yeah, I mean, I think it could happen. I don't know if it will happen, but if it does, they should hit up you, Derek. You got some good ideas.
Yes, I'll either take it to the next level or completely derail it. One of the two, maybe both. Yeah, and it's interesting because, right, that would be, with James Wan, you always think that he's kind of thinking ahead, because you had, the Saw, Insidious, Conjuring, all three huge franchises And then, Aquaman, he played in the Fast and Furious sandbox. I mean, it'd be hard to imagine that he hasn't at least thought about it, just because he's so good at creating, especially because this is like, he was part of the team that created this idea. So he has the IP, he has like partial ownership over the IP. So it would kind of make sense where you'd at least have to think about it. So maybe it's not as far-fetched as initially thought.
Well, with that, we're going to close out this episode. I think we covered a lot of Malignant. And if you're still with us and you haven't seen the movie, you got to check it out. And because we talk, you listen to us too much, Corpse Club listener. If you haven't seen the movie, you've listened to us talk about it too much for you to not see this for yourself. And for everybody else who has seen it, I hope you enjoyed hearing us dig into it and hearing the different perspectives. And so we want to thank Bryan, our engineer, for helping us out each and every episode. And as always, we want to thank our listeners, including those of you who have signed up for a Corpse Club membership. Make sure to visit corpseclub.com. You can check out all our episodes, sign up to become a member, and all kinds of different benefits, shirts, pins, membership cards. Also, a big help would be if you could rate and review us. If you haven't already, if you have, thank you. But rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Every rating and review really helps. If you're looking to listen to Corpse Club on a different platform or device, we're on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Amazon Music, and a few other podcast providers. If you want to get in touch, you can reach out anytime. We're at contact@corpseclub.com. We're on Twitter. We're at Daily Dead News and at Corpse Club. And we're on Instagram and Facebook under Corpse Club as well. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, stay scary.